Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back inside Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast. I'm Ryan Buckeye, Josh Shaw here. Going to speak a little bit about fruit juice today, Josh. Right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite cocktail juice, Josh? Are you more of an orange juice guy? You a lime juice guy? Margarita lime? You live in Austin.
No.
You seem like a margarita lime guy now.
You know, I don't. I think it's more because of the tequila, but I am a big fan of like hard lemonade. So little Tito's vodka and lemonade. That's something that I like.
It sounds awesome, except for it's also 35 degrees where I'm at right now, so it's not that awesome yet. But I'm sure it's like, what, 65 by you right now?
It's actually 90 today. Yeah.
What was that?
90. Yeah.
9-0. Holy hell. Okay, it is the middle of March, people. It's 90 degrees in Austin, Texas. But there is a purpose. There is a theme to today's episode, and it's not how drunk can Josh Shaw get when it's 90 degrees out in Austin, Texas, and how much barbecue he can eat. But it's when life gives you lemons, do you make lemonade, or what do you do with it? And we've all gone through life, had hardships, had obstacles, had something thrown in our path that was unexpected, and it's like, what do you do? Do you embrace that? Do you learn from it? Do you move on from it? And I think, Josh, you and I have kind of talked about some things in our past here before, and obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, which is challenging a lot of people, including us even a little bit to an extent. But really, I think that what happens when somebody is challenged with an obstacle in life is you really find out what that person is made of, right? Like, how do they respond to a crisis? How do they respond to certain circumstances? And do they give up? Do they roll over and die? Do they thrive, excel? And I think that says a lot about a person and what they can do. And I'm excited about this because I don't think you and I have really ever talked about huge obstacles that we've had in our ways personally. Maybe we have. But I think our personal stories, obviously I have a couple that I'm going to share for the first time actually here on the podcast. But I think they're going to help people kind of say, you know what, maybe mine's not so bad. Or maybe I need to pull myself back up and get my shit back together and get going.
Yeah. This was obviously inspired by the current kind of situation we're in right now with COVID-19 and people are really getting thrown for like a big challenge in their lives. I mean, if you put it in the context of maybe some other generations' big challenges, it might not seem as big. And that's just depending on how you look at certain situations. But I think right now it's this idea that, we're in a situation that is potentially a learning opportunity for people because trying times, to me, I think teach valuable lessons. And that's around, the idea of figuring out what your priorities are and how much resilience you have and what relationships are important to you and, where do you lean on and those kind of things. So it's this idea that, the common, mantra or the saying that people always say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade type of thing. And It's this idea around like are you actually going to just cope with the sour taste of the lemon? Like, are you going to eat the lemon because you can do that? Or are you going to try to figure out like, how can I add sugar and water to make this and transform it into something more useful to a lot more people? And that's where that kind of saying kind of comes from. And I think that for me, I've always taken that to heart in the sense that if people listen to my content or if they've ever worked with me, you hear me say a lot of times that a challenge is simply an opportunity seen through the right lens. So if you look at that challenge through the right kind of framework or the right mindset, it actually becomes a huge opportunity as long as you could see past that initial like punch in the face.
Yeah. And
that's where we're at right now. We are punched in the face. Now, are you actually able to see this as an opportunity, or are you going to kind of sulk and cry about it and sit there and go, what do I do now? I'm just going to sit back and just wait for somebody else to handle and fix this for me. This, to your point earlier, it's saying that this is what makes somebody. This is what defines you. This is that thing that you ultimately are going to be looked at, regardless of what other challenge comes up. People are going to look back and say, well, he didn't do much during that time. He didn't really understand how to actually put himself in a positive mindset to actually come through this in a positive way.
Think about professional sports, right? Those who come up in the biggest pressure situations are considered great. And whether it's you're at the free throw line with 0.4 seconds left, down one, you have 2 free throws, whatever it might be. LeBron James is awesome for this. But that's how people define greatness. Is like, how do you come through during these pressure times? You look at like a Tom Brady or Tiger Woods. I mean, just unbelievably great. Same can be said for people in business. I mean, are you somebody when pressure gets tough and things get hard that you fade? Or do you step up? Do you take on more? Do you try to survive and thrive during times like this? And I think times like we're in now separate the good from the great in terms of people, businesses, and all the above. And the same can be said about personal conflict that you have in your life and personal obstacles that you come into. It's like, what do you do? I mean, we all go through personal, professional hardships, and it's really how you're wired as a person. I think the best employees that you find then, or the best, workers, are the ones who see these as opportunities, not as, see every failure, every letdown, every setback as an opportunity versus a chance to sit back and think to myself, like, what the hell have I done? And there are 3 things in my life that really stand out to me in terms of obstacles or setbacks. The first is initially going to college. Nobody in my family went. So I'm from a small town in Wisconsin. You're from a small town in Ohio. Like, we're not a highly educated town. Not a lot of people understood the process of applying for college and then the process for applying for financial help. Like, my family was not well off. We did not have money. I had to pay for every dime of college myself. And we've talked about this before. Like, I took on, obviously, my undergrad debt. But after I got my undergrad degree, because I knew I was smart, like, I wanted to keep going. And I wanted to go to a graduate degree or graduate program. But I also knew it was going to cost your boy 6 figures to do so. So that was obstacle 1. It's like, do I take on more debt? Because I see if I do this, there's a long-term payoff for this. That, you have to look into the future and say, and then at the same time, like, am I going to use this? Am I just doing this to do this? Or am I actually going to leverage and utilize this? So for me, that was the biggest thing. I said, you know what? Fuck it. We are going to take on the debt because I know, I'm confident in myself. I'm betting myself that this graduate degree, these 3 little letters behind my name, are going to open these doors for me to be able to get my foot into a business, an industry, or whatever, where I can excel and thrive. Check. It worked. I bet on myself. But that's something, like, when it comes down to finances, when it comes down to money, that's a huge obstacle. That's a huge scare for people. So when your back is against the wall and you're stuck with a decision, like, do you take on more debt? Do you put yourself, strapped for cash? That's a hard decision to make. And so I think a lot of people, Josh, in that case, they make the safe decision. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to make the safe decision and to make sure that you're well off financially, but you may have just overlooked an opportunity that could have really paid off big time for you in the future.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think that it can sometimes seem counterintuitive, or at least it seems like it is more difficult to stay the course in times of like chaos or a crisis, where you tend to then become extra defensive when there's actually the opportunity for you to kind of dig in and be more on the offense.
Yeah.
Talking about this in just the context of the current kind of situation we're in right now, I know you and I both are not kind of backpedaling. We've increased our expenses. We've increased our output. We've increased, both of us have talked about this off camera before we got on this about, hey, what are we doing? Because, we obviously are friends as well, and we're making sure that we are getting through these things well. But both of us, have people that we pay. So It's one of these things where, I'm making sure that I am increasing that right now, because I know that for everybody that is crawling back and kind of getting into a fetal position and that type of situation where there's less people that are going to get out and actually continue to push. And
right.
I want to be one of those people to push. So I'm going to go and do this because I'm betting on myself. Ultimately, I'm betting on myself, and I'm most, trusting or confident in myself over anything else. I could care less about what the government's going to do, what is ultimately going to happen from they're going to give us this payment or this loan or this, or I don't care about it. I'm going to take this action in my own hands. I'm going to figure out that my personal action is going to be the best decider if I'm going to be successful or not. And regardless if the environment around me looks scary and everybody's, trying to figure out what to do, there's uncertainty, whatever, I'm going to continue to push as hard as possible towards what I believe is going to be long-term successful to me. I might pivot a little bit in the short term to make sure that my business model is going to help the people that are most affected towards this, but I'm also going to make sure that I am continuing to focus on my long-term vision, because my vision is not going to change regardless of what the environment in front of me is.
Yep.
Now, my short-term pivot, my strategies might change a little bit based around the environment, but it's not going to remap to a new vision. My vision still stays the same. So how do I continue to push forward towards that? That's kind of where my mind's been wrapping around lately. And maybe it's a lesson for people to think about, is that if you really understand what you want to do in your life, be that personal, be that professional, whatever that is, if you have this vision for your life, it doesn't matter what's happening right in front of you. Now, you might hit a roadblock, but the idea is that it's not going to change what that ultimate vision is, as long as you continue on with this path and you keep pushing and you keep putting out as much effort as possible. You might not be getting the same results as you always get, and that might be frustrating, but short term is not going to ultimately affect the long term if you just continue to just push as hard as possible in the current state. And then want to caveat that, at least in the sense of like, don't make stupid decisions. Obviously, don't overextend yourself. This isn't the time where you want to try to put a bunch of leverage on yourself to make sure that you're like, it's going to be a flip of the coin if you make it or not. But I think it's one of these things that you have to really stay on the offense here. It's not the best decision to be in the defensive position, because you are just going to ultimately get steamrolled if things don't work out the way that you are hoping that they're going to work out.
I mean, the vision part is what I think people need to hang on to, because whatever the end goal is, wherever you want to be, whatever, as cliche as it sounds, no matter what happens in between, that should still be where you want to be. So, if you have a goal, an aspiration to succeed in life in something, I don't give a shit what happens between point A and point Z. Get to point Z. What happens between A and Z is irrelevant, really, as long as you still get to Z. So, like, what you do in between is going to obviously get you to Z. So, I always wanted to be in this industry. I knew I wanted to be in fitness. I knew I wanted to be in dietary supplements. So, after I got my MBA, I took a job with supplementwarehouse.com. We've talked about this before on this podcast. That was my foot in the industry back in 2014. I took a pay cut, Josh. Like, I took a pay cut from an insurance. I was working for Progressive Insurance, making $55,000 a year. Maybe 60. I got an MBA. When you get an MBA, you're thinking, I should be making six figures, right? I mean, that's kind of, you come out of your MBA, you're thinking at least 80, 90, 100K, I should be making minimum. I took a step back and made $50,000 a year just to get into this industry. Like, I mean, that is the life said, okay, here you go. Here's your obstacle. If you want in, you're gonna get in, but you're gonna have to suffer for a little bit. And I said, fuck it. Like, I want to be in this bad. I will give up money now because hopefully it pays off later. 6 months into the job, Josh, 6 months into the job, I was fired. Why was I fired? Because I didn't like what I did there. I hated what I was doing. They had me do data entry, order entry. So I started looking for another position. I looked in med device sales, of all things. I took a job interview out in Denver, Colorado, supplement warehouse, found out about it, and said I was dishonest and let me go. There it was, my whole dream up in smoke, just like that. I was in 6 months in the dietary supplement industry, and I was fired. My only job I've ever been fired at in my entire life. Like, I don't get fired. You don't fire somebody like me. That just doesn't happen. But that's an obstacle. I could have sat there and fuck, I'm done. Like, there's no other way to do it. I just got fired from a job I took a pay cut in, to which I was, mitigated to doing order entry. Like, they didn't respect me. They didn't respect my skills as an employee. But I looked at it and said, okay, you know what? I gave the big old F you. And I said, all right, I'm going to go back to Minneapolis. I took a job back outside the industry, but I never forgot. Like, I never forgot I wanted to be here. So back to your point of vision, like, I still wanted to be in fitness. I still want to be in dietary supplements. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to accumulate more skills to make me more valuable in this space. So I digital marketing director for a hearing aid company, of all things. I learned how to do Facebook ads. I learned how to do Google Analytics. I learned how to do PPC campaigns, all these different things within digital marketing that I knew would make me valuable in the business. So take a pay cut, get fired. Dreams could have been shattered. I said, no, they're not. I kept going. And then in 2016, literally basically 2 years to the day I got fired, I started Fitness Informant. And now here I am, right? Like, so it's like, if, as long as you can maintain that vision again, then in this case, I was fired, and what did I do? I didn't sit back, I didn't fold over, I didn't die. I used it as leverage, as a reason to keep trying hard, to keep pressing forward, and to keep accumulating more skills that I could to be valuable. I leveraged the relationships I made in those 6 months in the industry that I still have today. There are people that I speak to today at with FI, that I developed a relationship with back in 2014 during my 6-month stint with Supplement Warehouse. It's a relationship-based business. You don't forget those things. And there are people that could have just, in that situation, could have said, you know what, whatever. I'm going to go do the safe thing. I'm going to go take a 9 to 5 and just do that every single day because that's what I was meant to do. And for me, that shit didn't work. So I'm interested, Josh, like in your life, have you been punched in the face pretty hard to the point where you're like, it could have really deterred your path in life for somebody. It could have really deterred their path in life. Obviously, you're wired a little bit differently than most. But can you remember a time in which something happened and you're just like, yeah, that was a pivotal moment in my career, in my life?
Yeah, I think there's two stories. I think one that I've shared on this channel before was, when I graduated with my MBA as well, like this is 2009, and I decided to move out to Las Vegas in one of the worst hit economies, during that time. And I was living on a buddy's couch. I didn't have much for savings. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything going on out there. I basically had a safe place to live, and I figured it out. And during that time frame, obviously needed to make some concessions on what my ego said I should have been getting, to your point as well. Like,
right.
You have these lofty expectations when you leave with your graduate degree thinking, I'm going to make this, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be able to be fulfilled in my job and do all these types of things. Like, I didn't have that benefit. No. I had to make the hard decisions and say, I need to make money. I need to pay off debt. I need to make the hard decisions to make sure that I can do the things I want to do long term. I have to start somewhere. I have to start with making money to be able to make sure there isn't these huge chains on me, later in life, that I can start to make those decisions. So I made that decision to do what I needed to do. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I rented cars.
Yeah.
That's for most people, if they think about what I do now, they'd be like, how did that happen? It was the thing about it is that I checked the ego at the door and said, I need to make money and I need to do the best that I can at this job. And a year plus later that I was in that position, I got elevated multiple times and got a ton of really great experience that still today I feel like I'm grateful for. But at the time when I took that first job, it was more of just shut up. And if they ask you to clean the toilets, you clean the toilets. Just right. You need to do what you need to do. And that was kind of that first initial point of just checking myself and doing what I needed to do. But why this all kind of comes kind of full circle is that the second story was, I started my consulting company, and in 2013, the first year, I started it on a very high note. I guess a manageable note for most people, where if you talk to any entrepreneur, if you were, a high performing person in a job and you're making a good amount of money, over 6 figures, and then all of a sudden you start your entrepreneurship career, you're basically going to take a huge pay cut. It's just because that first year, you're obviously not going to be able to pay yourself what you think and what you hope, because you're trying to start your business. You're putting all that money back into the business. So your actual income is very low. But it was very manageable the first year because I kind of started off with a ton of existing people that were interested in working with me right off the bat. So, but after those projects kind of weaned off, I started to then see some of my, let's say, weaknesses, where
you have
a
weakness, Josh?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not a salesperson. You know what I mean? I'm not somebody that's a traditional salesperson. I am somebody that's a very much value oriented salesperson, where I'm trying to give value and whatever, but I'm not somebody that understands how to talk to somebody in a way to get them to buy what I have. So it's taken me time to learn that. But during that time frame, I was very much struggling, you're trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do right now? I'm sitting in, 18 months into my business and thinking is this for me? Should I go and take a job at a brand? Should I go and do something differently? This maybe isn't the path that I thought. Maybe I'm not going to be able to actually do what I think I'm going to be able to do. But it was that time at renting cars that I kind of dug in and said, all right, well, you need to do what you need to do in the short term. And that was the time when I started to diversify some of my clients at the time. I started to take on people that were outside of maybe the things that I was most interested in, because I know that I needed to do what I needed to do. And I had to get that experience. I had to make money. I had to, whatever means necessary to keep this dream alive, I needed to do those things. And I made those difficult decisions during that time frame because I realized that I had to kind of love everything that happens to me, in the sense of yeah, it was difficult, but I knew that was also arming me for things in the future. Right. It was going to help me in the future, because I knew that times might be great, but times are also going to be tough. And I'm going to need to have times where I understand that misfortune. And still to this day, this is more, I guess, getting into more mindset, but to this day, even though I would consider my life pretty good and everything's going in the direction that I'd like it to be, I still practice mindset tricks for practicing misfortunes and making sure that I live maybe certain aspects of my life extremely frugally, because I believe that humbles me and kind of brings me back to the time where I need to train my brain to think this could all come crashing down. And that is something that a lot of people today are kind of coming up against this thing right now. They're saying, they've built this business, and now all of a sudden they have this external kind of shock into the system, and they're not necessarily knowing if they're going to be able to keep their business alive. And I, have kind of tried to train my brain for that, because I don't know, this current shock is not necessarily going to hurt my business, because this is ultimately when people are looking for some of the stuff that I do and some of the advice and strategic things. But I know that a year from now, it could be different, 2 years from now. So I can't get too in my head, too much ego, too much thinking everything's going to be positive, because it's all cyclical. It's all going to come back eventually. It's not always a straight line to success, this long-term vision. I know eventually there's going to be another one of those things that I get hit in the face, and I'm going to need to be able to have the right mindset to flip this and do this, because it's the mind that ultimately could be your biggest cheerleader, could also be your biggest enemy.
God,
and you need to make sure that your mind is properly trained to be able to deal with the highs and the lows and stay as stoic and kind of as focused and directed as possible, because you're going to have a bunch of highs, you're going to have a bunch of lows, but it's ultimately going to be a long-term line up to the top. It's not going to be a straight line, but it's going to be, if you plot it on a map, you're going to see that straight line go up. So you're going to need to be able to balance the highs and the lows the best that you can.
It's funny you bring that up, the highs and lows, and this whole your mind can be your biggest asset, but it can also be your biggest mind fuck. It can really you can really start when you start to self-doubt yourself. My God, it's one of the and I'll be real. Have we all had? I mean, have I dealt with self-doubt? Yes, I have. I think we all have at some point. It's not fun until you pick yourself up. You're like, what am I doing? I'm better than this. But something I'll talk about for the first. I recently just went through divorce, and I have not talked about this publicly, even on my channels. And for me, that right there is the ultimate mind, the low in life. You failed at something. I can look in the mirror, and I can admit that I failed at something you're not supposed to fail at. You make an oath, you make a promise that you're supposed to stick to that promise, and I didn't. So, I failed. In that case, you really have sort of an opportunity to self-evaluate yourself as a person, and I was able to do that and realize there were things in my life that were missing that I needed in order for me to be the best version of myself. So going through that, as tough as it was, Josh, and as hard as it was, and you've been through it, you've been there for me through the entire thing, I came out of it on the other side now much better off. For me, I'm happier now. My business is in a different place now. And that was the biggest thing for me. It's okay, and this might resonate with people listening if you've gone through this before. When you're an entrepreneur, that's not just your business. It was also hers. And for me, I gave up the farm. I let her keep everything. All I wanted was the business, because it was the thing that I created. And again, it's me betting on myself. It's the only source of income I have. I said, I need this. And I took it. And now I've never worked as hard. That's for sure. But I've also never been as confident in my brand as I am now. And that was an obstacle. Like, I don't need to get into the details of the obstacle, but like, you don't face many obstacles like going through a divorce in life, because that is such a personal obstacle versus like losing your job, tough, hard, right? Trying to decide if you should go to Vegas, very tough. But being with somebody for, in my case, 11 years and then done, and it's all you know as an adult, like that's a different kind of tough. And that is, I took it, and I could have been depressed. I could have let FI fail. I could have went back to corporate America. I saw it as an opportunity for me to kind of break out of my shell, do what I've always wanted to do on this brand, make this brand what I wanted it to be. And that might sound weird to people listening or watching, being like, that sounds weird, man. You got a divorce and now you're like super happy and you're doing all this stuff with your business. Well, it's what I needed. I needed the chains to be broke off a bit. Obviously, like I mentioned, I mean, I'm working Sunday nights until 10 p.m. and it's things like that, but it's not work as much as I enjoy what I do. And I'm able to commit the time to doing that. It's been great. But that is a point in my life which has been probably the hardest point, and where you really kind of self-evaluate and figure out, like, okay, now this is, what do I do from here? Like, this is the low of the lows. You hit rock bottom in terms of your personal life. What do you do? And you've heard the stories, man. People go through divorce and they become depressed. They turn to drugs and alcohol. They do, a lot of things that we are not going to talk about on this podcast. That is not, or who I am not. Like, that is never who I've been. And again, the same thing is like, the minute I left that house, I went into survival mode. I got a place to live. Like, I went boom, 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 because that's how I'm wired. But again, to kind of go back to the beginning of this episode, it's like that's what separates the good from the great too. It's like, how do you respond in adversity? And I know you told us a story about going to Vegas, Josh, and you said you had like a second story too. Like, I mean, what's the other like right hook that you took?
Well, it was around the idea of like when I was doing the consulting, that 18 months in, I was, kind of on survival mode or whatever. I think that was kind of a second one. For me, I know that we've kind of talked about this off camera before, and I've shared some of the stories around like kind of a similar situation that I had with kind of a long-term relationship, not to the point of like having that government paper that says, you're married, but, having that same kind of long-term thing and having, and giving you advice in terms of like what I did. And I think both of us think very similar. So it was easy for you to understand where I was coming from. But right. I dug in as well. I mean, I was, 7 days a week, 14, 15 hours a day. Cause I was thinking to myself, well, there's a lot of things that are going wrong in my life right now. And I'm going to try to obviously fix those things. But there's one thing that I can control through all this is my hard work and my effort towards the thing that I love the most. And that's work. That's my professional life. I know that a lot of people will think that's crazy, but like, I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do. I like working hard. And I thought, if I could put my effort towards that, and make sure that I'm at least in a positive mindset, then I could fix the other stuff during that time. I could kind of do the, walk and chew gum at the same time. I could do both of these things, but I need to make sure that I'm in the right mindset and healthy enough to walk to be able to do this. So I kind of dug in, and I know that's something that you did as well. And not to say that you or I enjoyed, or anybody enjoys going through those things, but it goes back to that point of needing to like love everything that happens to you, because either it's going to be a positive or something that's looked at traditionally as a successful point of your life, or it could be looked at as a positive, successful thing for what most people don't, because it's a learning experience, more of just an idea that, I learned a ton about myself. I learned a ton about the people around me. I learned, you start to learn about all the things that the kind of the people come out from under the rocks and stuff. You know what I mean? You start to understand like who is your inner circle. You start to cut things. You start to realize like, what is your priorities? What are your relationships you need to focus on? What are, all these things start to come up during these challenging times, because that's when people show their true colors. It's during these challenging times. So though it might not be something that you see like as a success, where most people think of it as, I also think like if you have the right positive mindset towards these challenges and you love everything that happens to you, it becomes a successful point in your life, because you're able to pull the lessons that you need off of them to make sure that you're stronger for the next time something like that happens to you.
Totally agree. I love this episode just because I think a lot of people are gonna be like, you know what, I've gone through that, or I've had this happen, and maybe I didn't do the thing I should have done during this time. And here's what I'll tell you: it's not too late. Like, it's never too late. You can always still change the course of whatever it is that you're on. If there's still something that you're passionate about or something you want to achieve, who's to tell you can't do it, right? Like, I mean, life is a fascinating thing. It's crazy, and not to be like sentimental or cliche or anything like that, but I mean, you look at Josh and I. We're in our 30s. We're entrepreneurs. We're doing well for ourselves. That started with an idea, with a goal, right? And we busted our asses, and we lived, below our means, like scrap by. I mean, I've never seen Josh wear a logo T-shirt in my fucking life. It's always been a white T-shirt because he's frugal, and it's good. And I like it. I mean, he doesn't buy real grass for the wall behind him because he doesn't want to pay the water bill to water it. So he is a very frugal man, but he understands like what he needs to do to be successful and to be where he wants to be in life. I'm the same way, and hopefully those of you listening, watching, can be the same way too, because I mean, you just never know what can happen for sure. So if you like what you heard here on the podcast, hit that subscribe button, iTunes, Spotify, watch via YouTube, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, 2 Guys, 1 Shaker Cup, at Jay Shaw Consulting, at Fitness Informant. Josh, I will let you leave the listening and viewing audience with some words of wisdom if you have any, which I know you do.
Well, what I'll say is that if we are bringing this back to the current kind of situation we're in, and you want to pull a lesson from the last hypothetical punch in the face from the economy standpoint, the Great Recession type of phase, the time that small businesses or new businesses got created during that time was the kind of the highest point. I think in terms of websites getting started and a bunch of things like that. So what I'll say is that though in your face it might seem like things are extremely difficult and it might not be to you the best time to start a business or side hustle or whatever, if you have the bandwidth and you have the passion and you're interested in doing something for yourself, this is the best time to do it. Yep. And what I would say is that go and look at, I think Shopify, Adobe, a bunch of them, a ton of them are doing like free extended things right now. So if you are in a position, maybe you don't have the capital to start anything right now, a ton of these bigger businesses that are understanding the situation that everybody's in right now, they're giving you the opportunity to have a little bit longer of a cash cycle on your expenses and saying, hey, this is a good time. Let's do it. You know what? So what I would say is like, dig in, think positive. This is the perfect time to do one of those things. And even if it's scary, just leap towards it and lead with your passion and lead with your hard work and you'll be fine.
Love it. Again, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review. It helps up the algorithm. Until next time, Josh Shaw, Ryan Buckeye. Wash your hands, wear your mask, and be safe.